Hello everyone, my name is Rafid, and today we're going to talk about how the US dollar became the global financial force in the first place. This topic, it really pulled me in. Whatever's happening right now with the US dollar, the BRICS, the global finance, it's not just economics, it's power, it's strategy. It's the kind of shift that affects all of us, even if you're not watching. And if I'm thinking about this deeply, I'm pretty sure some of you are too. So let's dive in. So, how the US dollar became so powerful in the first place, because it wasn't always like this. Right after World War II, all the major nations came together in a place called Bretton Woods and made a historic decision. Let's peg all the major currencies to the US dollar. And the dollar itself will be pegged to gold at $35 an ounce. But why the US dollar? Why not the British pound or the French franc? Because after 1945, the US held over 2/3 of the world's official gold reserves. And here's the part most people overlook. While Europe and Asia were fighting the devastating wars, the US was supplying them with weapons, oil, food, and under US neutrality laws, those payments had to be made in gold. Not credits, not IOUs, explicitly in gold. So while these countries were fighting for their lives, they were literally shipping their gold across the Atlantic inside the US vaults. So by 1945, the US became the de facto vault of the world. And that's how the US dollar became this powerful. Smart business? Maybe. When you step back, it seems to look like the foundation of a global financial empire. But the gold-backed dollar didn't last forever. By the late 1960s, things started to change a bit. The US had printed too many dollars, more than it could back with gold. It was fighting an expensive war in Vietnam, had launched multiple welfare programs at home, and was spending far more than its gold could support. Foreign governments, especially France, started calling the bluff. They started demanding real gold in exchange of the US dollar reserves. And the US, they started bleeding gold fast. Then in 1971, President Nixon stepped in and did something that changed the financial course of the world forever. He closed the gold window. No more gold redemptions, no more $35 an ounce guarantee. The dollar was now a fiat currency, backed by nothing other than the faith in the United States government. For most currencies, or most countries, a decision like this would have been a total collapse for them, but not for the US, because just after a few years, they came up with another brilliant move. So without the gold, the dollar needed a new source of strength. And that's when the US turned to something the world couldn't ignore: oil. So in the early 1970s, Washington quietly approached Saudi Arabia, a powerful oil producer at the time, and made a deal with them. The deal was simple but brilliant. The US would offer military protection, weapons, and political backing. In return, the Saudis have to sell all of their oil exclusively in gold and make all the other nations agree to do the same, all the other OPEC nations. The Saudis agreed, and from that point on, all the countries in the world, whether it's India, Germany, they had to buy oil in US dollars. That meant holding dollars, trading in dollars, and saving in dollars. And just like that, the dollar had a new global demand engine. And this time, not gold, but something much more important, which is oil. This was the birth of the petrodollar system, and it changed everything. With oil priced in dollars, every nation had a reason to store US dollars with them, whether if they are trading with US or not. And that's how the US turned the world's most essential commodity into a tool for global dominance. And it worked for decades. But now, it's starting to crack a bit. Now here's where things get interesting. While countries like China, Russia, Brazil, and India are trying to trade without the US dollar, the US has started throwing tariffs like crazy. 100% tariffs on Chinese EVs, 200% tariffs on solar panels. Even the friendly nations have to comply with these tariffs as well. At the first glance, it might look like strength. But when you take a closer look, it looks a little bit different. It's not just a show of power. I think it shows how dependent US actually is on all the other nations. They're dependent on imports in manufacturing, in labor power, in all of these aspects. It's a sign that shows how dependent the US actually is on friendly nations playing by its rules. And the reason can US still act like this without collapsing? Because they're holding the world's financial system hostage. The banking whales, the international organizations, all of them. And to be honest, that's the only card the US has left. But for how long? So here's where we are today. Countries aren't just talking about moving away from the US dollar, they're actually doing it. China is buying oil from Saudi Arabia in yuan. Russia and India are dealing in rupees and rubles. Brazil and Argentina are experimenting local currency swaps. Even France just bought LNG from China in yuan. And then there's BRICS. They're not just expanding, they're actively working on making a new currency, backed by the reserves of their own currency, and in the future, there might be gold, oil, or some other commodities involved. Imagine a world where the dollar isn't the only currency you need to trade oil, or settle international loans, or store national wealth. We're moving towards a multipolar financial system, the one where China, Russia, and India make their own rules. And however the money flows, it doesn't go through Washington. And while the shift is happening, the US is raising tariffs and weaponizing the dollar like never before. Not because it's powerful, but because it's dependent, and that's the only card that they have left. But that doesn't mean the dollar is collapsing tomorrow. But it does mean that its time as the unchallenged king is numbered. So what comes next? That depends on how the US and the world is moving slowly but strategically towards a new financial system. One where no single country controls the flow of money or the flow of the whole world's financial system. Where power is shared, not monopolized. And in that shift, we are going to see tension, uncertainty, even conflict, financial or otherwise. But here's the part that matters. If we don't understand how the current system was built, we will never understand how it's changing or what might replace it. That's why I made this video. I've been reading, researching, and following these patterns for a while. And I figured, if I'm thinking about this deeply, I'm pretty sure some of you are too. And if you do, hit subscribe. We have a lot more to talk about. See you next time. Bye-bye.